Many of the world's largest organizations decide to work with the Big Four consulting firms as part of their digital transformation and overall change initiatives. But there's a dark side of the Big Four consulting firms that they don't want you to know about. I'm going to share that with you here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And I started my career at one of the Big Four consulting firms. So my background and experience, my early lessons within consulting came from the Big Four environment. I certainly see the value in Big Four consulting firms, and I understand why a lot of organizations hire the Big Four consulting firms. For some organizations, they trust the name. Other organizations might be using those same firms as their auditors, so they feel a connection or a need to use that same firm for their digital transformations. Other firms may be mandated by their boards that they use a blue chip, well-known consulting firm. Whatever the reason may be why you work with a Big Four consulting firm may be very well justified. However, there's a dark side that most organizations aren't prepared for. And what I want to do today is share what those dark sides are of working with and hiring the Big Four consulting firms, not necessarily to change your mind and to convince you not to work with them, but just so you know going in what those risks are so that you can manage the risk and manage the consultants rather than the consultants steamrolling and managing you. So that's what I want to do here today. And if you'd like to learn more about how to select and implement your system integrator, whether it's a Big Four consulting firm or any of the big system integrators out there, I encourage you to read our guide to selecting and managing your system integrator. You can find that by scanning the QR code right here, or you can go to the links below. The first thing to be aware of when working with the Big Four consulting firms is that they are in many cases wasting your money. Reason for that is because their job is to put as many bodies on your project as possible. Understandable enough, they're a consulting firm. They make money by billing by the hour. So of course, their economic self-interest is focused on making as much money as possible, as is every consulting firm, not just the Big Four consulting firms. The difference with Big Four consulting firms, though, is that the size and the magnitude and scale of the rate at which they burn through their clients' budget and the client's money is unprecedented. It's big, massive numbers. So when you have these big, massive overruns involving a Big Four consulting firm, it's typically because of that, because of the big run rate and the large bloated projects that often come with it. Now, the thing to keep in mind, again, true for all consultants, not just the Big Four consulting firms, is that they are spending your money. So the work and the value they think they're providing, whether it adds value or not, is your money. Yet oftentimes organizations don't have visibility into how that money is being spent, what value they are or aren't getting for it. And I'm going to come back to that point later today in terms of how you can better manage that. But those are the key points to keep in mind, is that when you're working with a Big Four consulting firm, they're spending a lot of money, and that money is yours. I mentioned how the Big Four consulting firms, and all consulting firms for that matter, have a vested interest to maximize their billable revenue and their billable hours. That's how they make their money. It's understandable. But the other issue here is twofold. One is that the Big Four consulting firms staff these projects with such size and scale that a smaller project isn't worth it to them. They won't typically touch a smaller project that doesn't involve dozens, if not hundreds, of resources on a project. So the size and scale of the economic misalignment is very large for some of these Big Four consulting firms. The other aspect to keep in mind is that the Big Four consulting firms typically have alignment with and loyalty to the software vendor or vendors that they are partnering with. So in many cases, they're receiving a cut of the subscription revenue that they're able to help sell, and their loyalties oftentimes conflict between the software vendor and the client. And so there are times where Big Four consultants are so myopically focused on their loyalty to the hand that feeds, which is in most cases the software vendor that they work with, that they can be blinded to what the client needs are. And in my opinion, if you're a client and you're hiring a Big Four consulting firm, they should be focused solely on your needs, and the alliance should be solely focused on you without having to worry about that conflict of interest between what your needs are from a business perspective and what the technological needs are from the vendor perspective. And those two things oftentimes come in conflict a lot more often than you think. So it's important to recognize that there is economic self-interest, as there is with any third party, And you just need to make sure you reconcile those and manage and mitigate those risks that go along with it. At the end of the day, the big four consulting firms are technologists. The technology they implement is what they focus on. It's probably why you hired them, because they're experts in certain technology or technologies, and their job is to design, build, and deploy technology. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to design, build, and deploy technology that works for your business and optimizes your business. You could have a consulting contract that has been adhered to 100%. They've delivered everything they said they would deliver. They did it on time. They did it on budget, although that rarely happens, but let's assume it does happen. And yet you could still end up with a dramatic failure on your hands, not because the technology doesn't work, but because it doesn't align with your business. Your people don't know how to use the software, and your operations come to a standstill, at which point, again, there's like economic self-interest here to where the big four consulting firm will actually benefit from the fact that you're harmed by this and having operational disruption, because you're going to keep them on board to try and fix the problem. So again, it's another perverse incentive where, whether they admit it or not, they actually benefit from you having trouble during your implementation, because the longer it takes, the more roadblocks you run into, the more they're going to benefit, because guess what? They make more money the longer the project takes and the more hours they sink into it. So it's important to recognize that their job is to deploy technology. Their job is not to ensure that your business benefits from the technology, even though they'll convince you that the technology itself will make you realize business value. But the technology itself is not going to be what delivers the business value. It's all the stuff that they typically don't do around change management, around process improvement, around architecture and integration to other third parties. All the other stuff that's typically outside the realm of what big four consulting firms are good at is typically what's going to make or break a digital transformation project. One thing that large organizations tend to forget is that they manage the system integrators. The system integrator, the big four consulting firm, does not manage the client. Yet, so many clients out there, so many organizations defer to a fault to the big four consulting firm. They defer to their expertise. They trust them, which is okay to a certain extent, but too many organizations take that too far and treat it as an open checkbook, as an open project plan, as just to have free reign over how the project is run. We recently worked with a large Fortune 500 organization based in the United States who agreed to let one of the big four consulting firms have ultimate decision-making authority over the project, which to me is absolutely unacceptable. That is not something that any organization should ever agree to, but this organization did. And this is a very sophisticated organization with very sophisticated procurement and legal counsel, and they still agreed to it. Now, the reason this is such a big deal is because it's not their project. Even though they're the experts, this is your business. They are one contractor. They're merely one piece of an overall transformation program. So there's no reason why you would want to defer the entire project to them and have them manage you. You should be managing them just like you would any other contractor, just like any other vendor, just like any other supplier. I can't think of a similar situation where an organization would bring on an outside vendor and just let that vendor handle whatever they wanted. Imagine building a building or a factory. You're not going to turn that over and hand it off completely to a third party without having pretty stringent controls and oversight in place. Yet, for a capital investment as big as a digital transformation, many organizations do exactly that. So just remember, you manage them, they don't manage you. And again, if you want to learn how to manage them better, be sure to download our guide to how to manage your system integrator. You can find that in the links below. Now, the biggest thing that the big four consulting firms don't want you to know is that you don't need them. Yes, they have the brand cachet. Yes, they have hundreds of thousands of employees throughout the world. Yes, they have a lot of experience with some of the biggest technologies in the world. Yes, they have some very smart people there. I'm proud of my background and experience having worked at one of these big four consulting firms, but at the end of the day, you don't need them. If they're not a good fit for you, if they're burning through your budget, if they're reckless with how they manage the project, if it just doesn't feel right, you may want to consider either replacing or at least augmenting them with other resources. Some examples or alternatives you might have is to go with a larger mid-tier vendor, especially if you yourself are a mid-size organization and you're working with one of the big four. It might be just overkill and too much complexity and too much overhead for an organization like you. You may decide to keep a core group of big four consultants for certain point areas of expertise and then bring in other contractors to help you with other pieces of the project. Now, Big Four consultants are really good at resisting this and convincing you that this is a bad idea because you'll have too many cooks in the kitchen or you need one point of accountability, whatever the case may be. But you don't want to listen to that because that is absolute garbage. That is turf protection, and that's a defensive move on their part. So if you need to bring in third-party resources, you should do so. If you need to bring in quality assurance or independent program management oversight, do that. And again, that should come from someone other than your Big Four consulting partner. And to be clear, and just as a disclaimer, that is a service that my company, Third Stage Consulting, provides. And that's a service we commonly provide to our clients that have hired and work with some of the Big Four consulting firms. And then the other option is you yourself can go to the open market and get independent contractors to manage different parts of your transformation. In fact, a lot of team members that work for these Big Four consulting firms are the same pools of contractors that we draw from when we're looking for technical contractors. And you yourself have access to those same people in many cases that the Big Four themselves would be deploying, except you don't have the middleman and you don't have all the politics and bureaucracy that goes with hiring them through the Big Four consulting firm. So just remember, you don't need them, and you certainly don't need to rely solely on them. It may be that they're a good fit for you, and if they are a good fit and it's working out for you, then great, stick with it. But if your gut is telling you that something's off, then I would go with that and maybe dig and explore into what your options may be. So those are some of the things to be aware of as you're navigating the world of Big Four consultants. I'd love to hear from you, though. If you've had experience, positive or negative or mixed, I'd love to hear from you. What has your experience been? What have your takeaways and lessons been? Love to hear your comments below, and it's something I'm always learning from the audience and learning from you, so I'd love to hear your feedback. And again, if you'd like to learn more about how to select and manage the best system integrator for your digital transformation, be sure to read our guide to selecting and managing your system integrator. You can find that for free on our website by scanning the QR code right here, or you can go to the links below. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day.